Some people rise by noise. Others rise because heaven removes the covering. You did not manufacture this attention, and you did not chase it into existence. You are being seen because alignment reached visibility and permission followed. When the light lifts, presence becomes undeniable without announcement, and observers notice weight before they notice words. This moment feels sudden, only because the work was hidden and now the veil has thinned. Attention like this arrives without effort when alignment becomes clear. You are not louder, sharper, or more aggressive than before. You are steadier. You carry consistency that registers beyond explanation. Matthew 5 verse 14 says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." Light does not argue for recognition. It simply appears and sight adjusts. Before visibility was allowed, character was tested where applause never reached. Private faith shaped inner alignment, discipline, trained response and restraint, refined motive. God permits being seen only after unseen places have done their shaping. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7 declares, "The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." What is being noticed now is substance, not performance depth rather than display. This recognition is not ambition rewarded, it is consequence revealed. You did not plan to be observed yet. Integrity has a way of drawing eyes. Authority attracts attention without intention. Influence forms quietly when identity is anchored, then surfaces when timing agrees. People sense reliability before they understand purpose, and curiosity follows stability. Another shift unfolds here. Being noticed carries responsibility, yet it also confirms trust. God reveals influence only after identity has settled beyond insecurity. You are not being elevated to impress. You are being positioned to steward impact. The pressure you feel is not threat. It is calibration aligning reach with readiness. The transition from obscurity to recognition often arrives with mixed emotions. Gratitude meets caution. Humility meets resolve. You remain grounded because the source remains clear. Proverbs 4 verse 18 explains, "The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day." Brightening is gradual, ordered, and purposeful, not chaotic or rushed. What others interpret as sudden obsession is simply attention catching up to alignment. Eyes follow stability. Interest gathers around peace. Power notices consistency because consistency signals capacity. You are not being spotlighted to perform. You are being acknowledged because foundation holds. You are allowed to trust the process unfolding around you, even when motives of others feel intense. Discernment guards direction. Patience protects your inner stance, and humility preserves favor. Visibility tests, listening more than speaking, restraint more than reaction. You continue walking faithfully, letting timing educate perception. You see, there is a visible difference between confidence and submission to God. Confidence borrows strength from success, yet submission draws weight from obedience. You carry a calm certainty that does not flex with opinion or pressure. People sense restraint guided by conviction, not hesitation shaped by fear. That distinction unsettles worldly power because it cannot be negotiated, flattered, or forced. What anchors you does not originate in human systems, so it cannot be managed by them. Obedience to God produces an unteachable confidence. You are not learning it from mentors or borrowing it from applause. Acts 5 verse 29 states, "We must obey God rather than men." That declaration forms spiritual posture. When obedience governs choice, approval loses leverage. You stop adjusting truth to remain agreeable. Alignment steadies decision-making because direction has already been settled beyond debate. Another shift becomes obvious. Alignment replaces approval-seeking behavior without announcement. You move without rehearsing explanations. Actions arise from conviction rather than reaction, shaped by clarity instead of impulse. Proverbs 19 verse 21 reminds you, "Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." Purpose outranks preference, and your steps reveal which voice leads. This anchoring creates moral strength that resists manipulation. You are not provoked into defensiveness or rushed into compromise. Integrity signals independence from control because motives remain transparent. Those accustomed to leverage feel exposed by consistency. Authority rooted in faith does not raise its voice. It stands quietly unbothered by pressure because it answers to something higher. Decision-making reveals this allegiance. You choose with patience rather than panic, guided by truth rather than trend. Isaiah 33 verse 22 declares, "For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king, he will save us." That order matters. Judgment, instruction, and rule flow from one source, and your choices mirror that hierarchy. Because clarity is settled, false hierarchies become visible. Systems built on intimidation lose influence over you. You recognize when power demands allegiance without truth, and you decline without hostility. Submission to God produces freedom from coercion. You respond respectfully while remaining immovable, showing that restraint can be stronger than resistance. This posture draws attention without effort. Those who operate through control notice stability they cannot disrupt. Your obedience forms a boundary they did not expect. Confidence shaped by submission carries weight because it does not compete. It occupies space calmly rooted in alignment that cannot be redefined by circumstance. This kind of spiritual standing does not rush outcomes. You wait without anxiety because trust governs timing. Actions reflect conviction, not reaction even under scrutiny. When pressure rises, alignment holds. What you answer to determines how you stand, and that answer has already been settled. Worldly power struggles to categorize you. You are present without posturing, firm without force, and clear without aggression. That composure unsettles expectations because it exposes dependence on noise. Obedience-centered confidence refuses to be taught by fear. It is learned through surrender, then expressed through steadiness that does not need reinforcement. Even opposition adjusts its approach. Manipulation fades when it finds no entry point. You are guided by conviction anchored beyond circumstance. Choices reveal who governs you, and that governance produces peace that outlasts pressure. Leadership stands visible through restraint, not explanation. This steadiness marks true authority. It does not compete for space or argue for position. You stand established, accountable to God alone, and that accountability orders every response. When alignment governs, confidence rests easily, and those watching sense the difference immediately. Once authority is settled, systems built on leverage fail when fear no longer works. You can watch how control shifts the moment intimidation loses its grip. Power expects compliance through pressure, yet something changes when you no longer react from anxiety. Independence rooted in God introduces a variable control systems cannot predict. When fear is absent, leverage has nothing to pull against. That absence exposes foundations many never question. Independence reveals how much influence depends on emotional threat rather than truth. Structures designed to dominate rely on urgency, scarcity, and intimidation. When conviction remains steady, those mechanisms malfunction. Psalm 118 verse 6 declares that the Lord stands with you, removing fear's authority. That assurance changes inner posture. You respond without panic, and the system notices immediately. Manipulation cycles depend on reaction. Unbending conviction interrupts that rhythm. Instead of escalating pressure, you remain consistent. Calm becomes disruptive because it denies expected outcomes. Power anticipates resistance or surrender, not peace. That composure unsettles dominant structures because it reveals how fragile they truly are when stripped of fear-based compliance. Another shift follows naturally. Self-governance rooted in God resists coercion without confrontation. You are not self-directed in pride, yet you are not controlled by threats. Romans 14 verse 4 asks, "Who has the right to judge another's servant?" That reminder places accountability where it belongs. When allegiance is clear, external pressure loses jurisdiction. Spiritual confidence removes emotional hooks. Manipulation often succeeds by triggering insecurity, urgency, or guilt. Those hooks fall away when identity is settled. You are not provoked into proving worth or defending position. Without emotional access, influence weakens. Control requires participation, and independence quietly withdraws consent. Clarity intensifies this disruption. When motives are transparent, psychological advantage disappears. Confusion benefits control, yet clarity dissolves it. Decisions made with discernment cannot be rushed. Proverbs 29 verse 25 warns that fear of man sets traps, yet trust in the Lord brings safety. That trust produces clear thinking under pressure, removing the advantage intimidation once held. Power struggles when influence fails. Authority accustomed to dominance grows uneasy when commands no longer compel. Calm consistency challenges assumptions about obedience. You move deliberately, guided by conviction rather than consequence. That steadiness exposes how much control depends on fear to function. This posture does not announce itself loudly. It appears in measured responses, patient silence, and unwavering boundaries. Systems built on leverage expect submission through threat, not through trust. When fear loses relevance, the structure must confront its weakness. This freedom becomes unsettling because it reveals alternatives to coercion. You remain respectful without yielding integrity. That balance confuses those accustomed to extremes. Submission to God produces freedom from coercion. You answer to a higher authority, and that allegiance reorganizes every interaction. Pressure loses urgency when obedience defines direction. Emotional neutrality becomes strength here. Without reactive energy, manipulation stalls. Calm consistency outlasts intimidation because it refuses to escalate. Power senses its influence diminishing, not through rebellion, but through absence of fear. That absence rewrites the dynamic entirely. Clarity continues shaping response. You choose patience over impulse, conviction over convenience. When fear no longer governs decisions, control mechanisms lose relevance. Influence collapses because participation has changed. Independence rooted in faith does not fight power. It simply renders certain tactics ineffective. You did not announce yourself, yet everything adjusted. You notice how rooms shift before words form, how tension softens, or resistance surfaces without effort. Presence changes the moment alignment enters, not because of performance, but because something deeper carries weight. This kind of arrival does not demand attention. It quietly reorders space because it answers to God rather than expectation. That realization reframes how influence truly works. What God forms carries spiritual substance long before visible action appears. You learn that obedience produces impact that volume never could. Luke 10 verse 19 declares, "Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you." That promise explains why atmospheres shift instinctively. What is shaped by God carries delegated strength that does not require explanation. From there, the environment begins adjusting rather than you adjusting to it. Atmospheres answer order, not effort. You discover that striving to be felt weakens influence, while resting in obedience strengthens it. When alignment is present, disorder becomes uncomfortable. Calm unsettles chaos simply by existing. That shift reveals who is grounded and who depends on noise to maintain control. Suddenly, truth exposes dishonesty without confrontation. You watch how false narratives struggle to remain intact when clarity enters the room. There is no accusation, no debate, yet unease surfaces. 2 Corinthians 2 verse 15 describes this effect clearly. For we are unto God a sweet savour of Christ in them that are saved and in them that perish. Alignment with Christ releases a fragrance that some welcome and others resist instinctively. Peace then begins revealing disorder. You do not correct behavior, the environment corrects itself. Calm highlights instability without effort. Emotional turbulence becomes obvious when contrasted with steadiness. That contrast speaks louder than confrontation ever could. Disorder is unsettled by peace because peace exposes what cannot remain hidden. Another layer unfolds quietly. Authority manifests without announcement. You do not claim position, yet boundaries hold. Movement slows around clarity. Decisions carry weight without justification. Psalm 114 verse 7 captures this unseen reaction. Tremble thou earth at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob. Creation answers to God's presence, and union with him carries that resonance into ordinary spaces. Then emotional environments recalibrate. Conversations soften or end abruptly. Pressure either dissipates or intensifies, revealing motives. You learn that spiritual clarity reorganizes emotional climates. Anxiety loses momentum near conviction. Manipulation struggles when certainty enters calmly. Presence becomes a stabilizing force simply by remaining consistent. This impact requires no speech. What you carry becomes testimony. People sense conviction before hearing beliefs. Integrity communicates louder than explanation. You realize that impact rooted in alignment leaves evidence without argument. Reactions reveal more than words ever could. Movement follows naturally. Some adjust willingly, others withdraw, but nothing remains neutral. What you carry invites a decision even when silent. You do not pursue influence. It emerges as consequence. Alignment carries momentum that does not require promotion. Still, this influence remains gentle. There is no need to dominate space or command attention. Weight does not rush. It settles. The atmosphere adjusts because it recognizes something unmovable. That steadiness creates space for reflection, conviction, and decision without pressure. What becomes evident is how quickly environments reveal themselves. Comfort zones shift. Power dynamics expose their fragility. What God shapes functions like light entering darkness. It does not argue with shadows. It removes them by existing. Friend, this kind of authority has fingerprints, not formulas. You sense it immediately because it does not announce technique or borrow language from systems. It carries weight without explanation, and that weight exposes imitation the moment it appears. You recognize that what flows through you was not learned by copying movements, but formed by walking with God when no audience existed. This kind of influence resists replication because it was forged through obedience rather than performance, and obedience always leaves marks that shortcuts cannot reproduce. Shift the focus slightly, and you see why systems struggle to manufacture what God alone forms. What God shapes carries substance that cannot be transferred through proximity or taught through curriculum. Zechariah 4 verse 6 declares, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts." That declaration removes technique from the equation. What you carry emerged from surrender, not strategy, which means it cannot be handed off like information or mimicked through exposure. Pressure played its part even when it felt unfair. Refinement through trials shaped depth long before visibility arrived. You were pressed in places no one applauded, and those moments carved discernment into your responses. Resistance forced you to listen more closely, choose more carefully, and depend more fully. No shortcut could replace that shaping, because endurance produces layers that imitation never develops. James 3 verse 17 describes the wisdom that results as first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits. Those qualities only emerge through lived submission. Then consistency began doing quiet work. Character stabilized credibility before recognition ever followed. You learned to respond the same way when watched and when overlooked, and that steadiness built trustworthiness over time. Consistency does not impress crowds quickly, yet it anchors depth deeply. Patterns formed in private eventually supported moments in public. What looked slow was actually structural, preparing you to carry weight without distortion. Move forward, and you notice another distinction. Trust grows where motives remain clean. Submission to God refined desire itself, removing the hunger for validation that often corrupts influence. You stopped measuring yourself against reaction and applause. Instead, direction came from obedience and peace followed alignment. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 5 makes this plain. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. That truth relocated confidence away from ego and into dependence. Comparison lost its power in this process. Authentic authority disrupts rivalry because it stands on origin rather than competition. You no longer needed to prove uniqueness or defend position. What God formed in you carried its own signature, making imitation irrelevant. Comparison fades when calling is clear because clarity removes the urge to measure worth through others. Another transition unfolds here. What is shaped this way does not fracture under pressure. Because it was refined through obedience, it remains stable when challenged. You do not scramble to protect image or control outcomes. Stability replaces urgency, and calm governs response. That steadiness unsettles environments built on performance because it reveals a different source of strength. Notice how this kind of influence invites discernment rather than imitation. Those watching may sense the weight, yet they cannot duplicate the process. What you carry reflects time with God, decisions made in secret, and faith exercised under strain. Systems can teach skills, but they cannot reproduce surrender. Only God-led refinement produces influence that endures without adjustment. When alignment settles, power begins to take notice without being summoned. You learned early that restraint speaks louder than reaction, and that mastery reveals itself through measured response rather than display. When pressure rose, you did not rush to assert dominance or demand recognition. You remained composed, and that composure drew attention more effectively than force ever could. The shift became noticeable in subtle ways. Restraint signaled control over emotion, not the absence of capacity. You were not withholding strength because it was lacking. You were governing it because it was present. Proverbs 16 verse 32 affirms this reality clearly. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. That verse reframed success. Victory appeared not in conquest, but in command over inner response. From there, silence took on new meaning. You understood that quiet moments were not retreats, but strategic pauses. Silence demonstrated discernment rather than fear, wisdom rather than avoidance. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 declares, "There is a time to keep silence and a time to speak," and you recognized that timing mattered as much as content. By choosing when not to speak, you protected clarity and prevented misinterpretation from steering the moment. Pressure attempted to rush you, yet you refused acceleration that would cost integrity. Timing became deliberate, not reactive. You waited until alignment, not urgency, governed action. That patience unsettled those accustomed to quick compliance. Calm refusal to be hurried disrupted expectations and exposed motives. When momentum did not bend you, observers recalibrated their assumptions. Another layer unfolded through emotional discipline. By regulating response, you removed leverage from manipulation. Provocation lost effectiveness because instability never appeared. James 1 verse 19 instructs believers to be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, and that instruction became practical wisdom. Listening outpaced reacting, and understanding replaced impulse. Without emotional access, pressure lost its grip. Calm composure continued reshaping the dynamic. Attempts to provoke instability met steadiness instead. You did not mirror aggression or absorb hostility. You answered with clarity or chose restraint, and either choice disrupted the cycle. Consistency unsettled manipulation because it denied predictable patterns. The absence of volatility became its own statement. Through this discipline, self-governance became visible. Leadership readiness revealed itself not through command but through control. You governed impulses before attempting influence. That inner order signaled maturity without explanation. Those watching recognized that stability cannot be borrowed or faked under strain. It emerges only when discipline has been practiced long before observation. You remained attentive, grounded, and deliberate, allowing steadiness to mature influence while preserving clarity under sustained observation from others. Attention intensified because strength remained unexploited. Power that does not rush to assert itself carries weight. You did not need to announce capability. Restraint preserved it. The decision to withhold reaction communicated confidence rooted deeper than circumstance. Observers recognized that unspent strength retains options, while reckless display exhausts credibility. This posture altered interactions. Conversations slowed, challenges softened, and pressure shifted tactics. You did not negotiate from insecurity. Boundaries held without enforcement because composure carried credibility. Strength governed by restraint proved more persuasive than argument. Momentum continued building quietly. You noticed how patience created space for discernment, allowing choices to emerge from clarity rather than emotion. Each measured response reinforced trust. Each withheld reaction preserved influence. Without escalation, situations resolved themselves or revealed their intent. Beloved, understanding came quietly, but it came early. You recognized patterns before they fully formed, and clarity arrived long before explanations caught up. While others waited for visible proof, you perceived direction beneath the surface. This was not haste or assumption. It was discernment awakening through alignment. You were not rushing ahead of God. You were walking in step, attentive to what He was already revealing. That awareness shifted how you interpreted people, moments, and opportunities. Discernment allowed you to recognize truth beneath presentation and intention. You noticed inconsistencies others overlooked and coherence others dismissed. Hebrews 4 verse 12 describes this precision plainly. For the word of God is quick and powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit. That piercing clarity separated what appeared sincere from what truly aligned. From that point, motives became visible before behavior followed. You were not suspicious, you were attentive. Spiritual perception exposed direction, early granting space to respond wisely rather than react emotionally. While words sounded convincing, your spirit registered alignment or resistance immediately. This perception protected you from confusion, masquerading as opportunity. Wisdom then began anticipating outcomes without demanding proof. You did not need situations to unravel before adjusting course. Insight revealed where paths would lead if followed unchecked. This kind of foresight carried responsibility. 1 Kings 3 verse 9 records Solomon's request. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart, to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. That same request shaped your posture. Discernment was not about control, it was about stewardship. Obedience sharpened this awareness further. As surrender deepened, clarity increased. You learned that this sensitivity grows strongest when self-interest yields to trust. Each surrendered preference refined perception. Each obedient step tuned awareness. Insight did not arrive through striving, but through alignment that made listening possible. That awareness served as protection. Destiny remained guarded because you recognized timing. Premature exposure could have compromised growth. You understood when to move and when to remain unseen. Discernment shielded purpose until structure was strong enough to sustain visibility. This restraint preserved integrity and direction simultaneously. Another benefit emerged through separation. Insight prevented unnecessary entanglement. You stepped away from situations that promised connection but carried confusion. You declined alliances that required compromise. Discernment simplified choices by clarifying consequences. Freedom expanded because you were no longer explaining why certain paths no longer fit. Quiet insight continued shaping response. You did not announce what you saw, you adjusted accordingly. That discretion maintained peace while preserving direction. Philippians 1 verse 9-10 speaks of this balance, that your love may abound yet more and more in knowledge and in all judgment, that ye may approve things that are excellent. Love guided perception, preventing arrogance and fostering humility. Clarity arrived without noise. You recognized when to speak and when silence would protect progress. It was not dramatic. It was accurate. While others debated possibilities, you moved with assurance grounded in understanding. This was not isolation. It was clarity shaping movement. Moments unfolded where your early perception proved correct. Outcomes confirmed insight, not to elevate ego, but to reinforce trust. You learned to value quiet confirmation over public validation. Accuracy mattered more than applause. This perception required responsibility. You guarded it carefully, refusing to cheapen it through impulsive speech. Discernment demanded patience. You waited while others rushed not from fear but from clarity. Timing aligned with understanding rather than pressure. As this awareness matured, peace accompanied decisions. There was no urgency to convince others. Truth carried weight without defense. You rested in the assurance that clarity had already arrived. Direction was settled even when circumstances lagged behind. You moved forward steadily, guided by insight others would later recognize. God showed you the end while others were still guessing. Yet clarity does not remain theoretical. It is tested when advantage is offered. You recognized the moment immediately, not because pressure was loud, but because conviction was already settled. The offer looked reasonable, even beneficial, yet something stronger held you steady. Integrity did not argue. It simply stood. That stillness drew attention because it revealed a foundation that could not be shifted by advantage or threat. From there, consistency began speaking louder than explanation. You did not adjust values to fit opportunity. You carried the same standards into private rooms and public spaces. Proverbs 10 verse 9 states, "He that walketh uprightly walketh surely." That assurance governed your steps. Stability replaced calculation, and direction followed conviction rather than convenience. Pressure returned in subtler forms. Incentives appeared dressed as wisdom, compromise disguised as maturity. Yet decisions continued reflecting inner agreement, not external reward. You understood that ethics do not require reinforcement when they are rooted deeply. Psalm 15 verse 1-2 asks, "Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? He that walketh uprightly, and worketh righteousness, and speaketh the truth in his heart." That measure clarified choices when ease attempted negotiation. As situations intensified, uprightness created credibility without announcement. You did not defend your standards, behavior defined them. People observed reliability forming through repetition. The same response appeared under scrutiny as in obscurity. That predictability unsettled manipulation because it removed variables pressure depends upon. Then time became a witness. Consistency across seasons proved trustworthiness. You did not waver when outcomes delayed or when compromise promised speed. Integrity matured quietly, strengthening resolve with every tested decision. Titus 2 verse 7 urges, "In all things showing thyself a pattern of good works in doctrine, showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity." That pattern became visible because repetition carved character into action. Respect followed naturally, not admiration fueled by charisma, but recognition grounded in dependability. You noticed how conversations shifted, requests carried caution, offers arrived carefully. Steadfast character altered how others approached you, not through intimidation, but through clarity. Opportunity continued testing resolve. Each moment confirmed that values were not situational. You declined shortcuts without bitterness. You chose patience without resentment. Upright living removed internal conflict, allowing decisions to emerge clean and undivided. That steadiness carried cost, yet it also carried peace. You were not divided between image and truth. Pressure lost leverage because there was nothing hidden to threaten. Integrity removed bargaining power from compromise. Silence became strength again. You did not advertise restraint. You allowed actions to accumulate weight. Over time, upright choices produced authority that explanation could not manufacture. Trust grew because predictability replaced volatility. God honored that stance quietly. Visibility arrived without pursuit. What was once unnoticed became evident because it endured. Reliability attracted responsibility. Faithfulness expanded influence. You did not seek recognition. Recognition followed consistency. Pressure still appeared, but it arrived differently. Attempts to bend resolve weakened because history spoke louder than persuasion. Integrity had already answered on your behalf. Even now, decisions remain anchored. You continue choosing what aligns rather than what advances quickly. Conviction governs pace, direction, and response. That immovability commands attention because it resists negotiation without hostility. You stand grounded, not rigid. Conviction keeps you flexible without fracture. Integrity continues shaping outcomes long before results appear. You understand that this posture is not passive restraint, but active alignment. Each refusal strengthens discernment. Each consistent choice deepens trust. Over time, character trains response until righteousness becomes instinctive rather than debated. You move with freedom because conviction has already decided. Friend, you didn't expand for approval. You stood fully formed. You entered spaces without adjusting your shape to fit expectation, and that quiet completeness became noticeable. Nothing about you strained for permission. You were present without performance, rooted without rigidity, grounded without apology. That posture carried strength because it came from identity already settled, not from the need to be affirmed. From that foundation, identity remained anchored regardless of environment. You did not shift depending on who watched or who evaluated. Crowded rooms and quiet corners received the same version of you. Romans 8 verse 15 declares, "For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father." That adoption anchored belonging before performance ever entered the conversation. Then confidence began flowing from calling rather than recognition. You were not animated by applause or silenced by indifference. Purpose fueled movement, not reaction. You understood that calling precedes visibility and recognition follows obedience, not the other way around. That understanding stabilized expression. You spoke when aligned and stayed quiet when wisdom required restraint. As attention increased, self-awareness prevented intimidation or comparison. You recognized your assignment without measuring it against another's. Comparison lost relevance because identity was already clarified. Ephesians 3 verse 12 states, "In whom we have boldness and access with confidence by the faith of him." That boldness did not manifest as dominance, it appeared as ease. You moved freely because fear had no jurisdiction. Gradually, presence began occupying space naturally without assertion. You did not announce importance or defend value. You allowed alignment to speak first. People adjusted without being instructed. Conversations recalibrated. Dynamics shifted. Presence carried weight because it was unforced, shaped by inner agreement rather than external pressure. Value, therefore, was not negotiated or defended. You did not explain worth to earn respect. You lived it consistently. That consistency removed the need for persuasion. Boundaries held without conflict. Choices reflected clarity, not anxiety. When value is understood internally, it no longer seeks validation externally. Observation intensified, yet purpose stabilized posture. Being watched did not distort behavior. You remained centered because intention remained clear. Joshua 1 verse 9 declares, "Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest." That assurance governed response, keeping courage steady and direction intact. Confidence continued expressing itself quietly. You did not shrink to accommodate insecurity, nor did you perform to impress power. You remained yourself across changing expectations. That steadiness disrupted assumptions about control. Systems accustomed to compliance through pressure found no leverage because who you are was not up for negotiation. Belonging had already been affirmed by God, removing the need for external approval. You were not auditioning. You were already accepted. That truth freed you to stand without exaggeration. Humility remained intact because confidence was not self-generated. Strength rested in alignment, not image. As moments unfolded, you noticed how freedom replaced defensiveness. You no longer guarded space anxiously. You occupied it calmly. Expression became clean, unentangled from reaction. Presence carried peace because identity was secure. Pressure tested posture again, yet nothing collapsed. You neither advanced aggressively nor retreated silently. You remained positioned. Purpose continued, anchoring response, filtering decisions before emotion entered. That internal order produced external steadiness. Without striving, you became difficult to intimidate. Without performance, you became impossible to ignore. You understood that ego demands attention, but grounded identity invites respect. That distinction preserved clarity as influence expanded. At the point of completion, visibility follows without pursuit. You never chased visibility, yet eyes began to gather because obedience has a way of making room. You walked faithfully when applause was absent, choosing response over recognition, and that steady obedience carried a quiet signal. Psalm 75 verse 6-7 reminds you, "For promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But God is the judge, he putteth down one and setteth up another." You understood elevation was never self-assigned, so you kept serving where you stood. That posture produced a shift. Visibility followed obedience rather than ambition, arriving slowly, almost unnoticed at first. You were not building a platform, you were building faithfulness. Influence emerged organically over time because consistency speaks louder than strategy. You showed up when it mattered, stayed anchored when it was costly, and allowed growth to occur without announcement. What developed in private matured enough to be seen in public without strain. Then a new movement unfolded. God positioned exposure intentionally, not prematurely, guarding you from visibility that could have distorted formation. Timing proved merciful. You were spared the pressure of being seen before being ready. Matthew 25 verse 21 echoes this order. "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things." Faithfulness came first, and recognition followed as confirmation, never as a prize to chase. As doors opened, recognition arrived as validation rather than reward. You recognized it as a signal that obedience had been acknowledged, not a crown to carry. That distinction protected humility. You stayed attentive to God's direction instead of public reaction. You did not rush to capitalize on notice because you knew influence is sustained by stewardship, not momentum. Gradually, visibility increased. Authority naturally drew attention without needing amplification. People began to watch, not because you demanded space, but because substance creates gravity. Favor invited scrutiny without effort. Conversations shifted when you entered. Decisions paused. Questions surfaced. You remained composed, understanding that being seen also means being evaluated, and integrity had already done its work. At this stage, destiny began drawing focus, simply because direction became visible. Isaiah 2 verse 2 declares, "And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it." You noticed how alignment made pathways clear, allowing others to recognize where God was leading without explanation. Even then, you resisted feeding pride. Attention was received with discernment, not indulgence. You stayed rooted in obedience, letting results speak, while motives stayed examined. You understood that favor is not ownership, it is assignment. That awareness kept your heart steady while eyes increased. With every step forward, influence continued unfolding without force. You did not manufacture relevance. You honored process. You trusted that God regulates visibility as carefully as preparation. The more obedient you became, the less optional notice felt, because light does not hide itself when placed where it belongs. You see recognition changes surroundings, not assignment. You remain steady when eyes increase because your calling was never born from attention. You lift your focus higher, remembering Colossians 3 verse 1 to 3. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. That truth anchors your identity beyond applause and guards your heart from drifting toward approval. With that foundation secure, humility becomes your protection. Favor may open doors, but humility preserves what enters through them. You refuse to confuse access with ownership. What God entrusts you, steward carefully. Recognition tests posture, not purpose. You keep your knees bent even when your name is spoken, understanding that pride erodes what obedience builds quietly. As movement continues, discernment sharpens under observation. Being watched requires wisdom, not retreat. You choose steps prayerfully, weighing timing instead of reacting to pressure. Psalm 37 verse 23 affirms this guidance clearly. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. You trust God to direct motion while you remain attentive and responsive. From there, focus stays eternal rather than external. Crowds shift, opinions change, but God's perspective remains constant. You measure success by faithfulness, not visibility. Eternal priorities steady your decisions, keeping your vision clear when distractions attempt to pull you sideways. What lasts beyond this moment matters more than what shines briefly within it. Next calling continues shaping your direction. Recognition does not rewrite assignment, it reveals stewardship. You listen closely for instruction, aware that God speaks for guidance, not display. Each next step unfolds through obedience, not urgency. You resist rushing ahead simply because attention suggests momentum. Calling requires patience equal to courage. Then obedience remains central despite recognition. You return daily to simple faithfulness, treating small instructions as carefully as visible ones. Philippians 1 verse 6 strengthens this resolve. Being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. God completes what he starts, not public affirmation. Under watchful moments, you practice restraint and reverence. You remember that being seen multiplies influence and accountability together. You guard speech, motive, and reaction, choosing consistency over impulse. Quiet obedience keeps you anchored when expectations rise. You seek counsel-test impressions and wait for confirmation. Pressure does not command you. Obedience does. In still prayer, direction clarifies and courage strengthens. You move neither to impress nor to withdraw. You move to remain faithful to God, trusting His wisdom to steady every decision made under light. Patience keeps perspective clear, ensuring growth remains healthy, unforced, and aligned with timing rather than noise and human pressure. Finally, God alone defines outcomes and timing. You release results back into His hands, refusing to manage perception or force fruit. Your role remains trust and obedience. His role remains fulfillment. When you stay anchored, progress unfolds without strain, and peace governs your pace. Stay rooted. Heaven is not finished with you. Before we close, I invite you to pause wherever you are and join me in a fervent prayer, opening your heart fully to what God desires to do in your life. Gracious Father, we come together with grateful hearts, humbled by your nearness and steady love. We pause, breathe, and acknowledge that you see every detail of our lives, even the moments we overlook. Thank you for watching over us, for guiding unseen paths, and for positioning us with wisdom beyond our understanding. We acknowledge you as the source of favor, protection, and purpose, trusting that nothing connected to us escapes your care. Tonight we ask you to steady our hearts and clear our vision. Remove confusion, fear, and distraction that try to crowd our thoughts. Replace anxiety with discernment, insecurity with confidence, and uncertainty with quiet assurance. Teach us how to walk wisely, speak carefully, and remain anchored in integrity, no matter who is watching or evaluating our lives. Let our character stay rooted in truth when attention increases. We thank you for the doors you open and the eyes you allow to notice us. We ask for your covering over every opportunity, conversation, and connection forming around our lives. Guard us from motives that seek control rather than collaboration. Protect us from influence that flatters while hiding harm. Grant us clarity to recognize what aligns with your will and the courage to step away from what does not serve your purpose. Lord, shape our hearts so success never replaces humility. Keep our spirits gentle, our intentions pure, and our decisions guided by wisdom. Teach us to move without striving to advance, without compromise, and to trust your timing without rushing outcomes. Let our confidence come from your presence, not from approval, power, or recognition given by others. We ask you to bless our work, our ideas, and our responsibilities. Let excellence flow naturally from diligence and faithfulness. Where pressure increases, supply peace. Where expectations rise, release grace. Where influence expands, establish boundaries that protect our families, our values, and our rest. May our lives reflect consistency, whether we are seen or unseen. Father, we lift our relationships before you. Align us with people who value truth, respect, and mutual care. Remove hidden agendas and unhealthy attachments quietly and completely. Replace them with connections that sharpen discernment, encourage growth, and strengthen our walk with you. Teach us to love without naivety and to trust without surrendering wisdom. We thank you for protecting our minds from intimidation and comparison. Silence voices that attempt to manipulate pressure or overwhelm us. Restore calm where tension tried to settle. Let our thoughts remain clear, our emotions steady, and our decisions grounded in peace. Remind us that our security rests in you alone. Breathe fresh courage into us as we move forward. Help us steward attention with wisdom and influence faithfully. Let our words bring life, our actions reflect integrity, and our presence bring stability wherever you place us. Shape us into vessels who carry responsibility without fear and opportunity without pride. Cover our finances, our time, and our resources with wisdom. Teach us stewardship that reflects trust in you and generosity that flows from faith. Where abundance increases, keep our hearts free from attachment. Where provision feels delayed, strengthen patience and hope. Direct our steps in decisions involving money and influence. Let integrity govern every agreement and transparency mark every exchange. Remove pressure to impress, compete, or prove worth. Establish contentment that remains steady through change. May our success never silence compassion or dull sensitivity to others' needs. Train us to listen carefully, respond thoughtfully, and act justly. Let gratitude stay active in ordinary moments and humility remain present during visible wins. Anchor us in discipline that sustains growth beyond excitement. Shape our future with foresight, restraint, and grace, allowing our lives to bless many without losing our devotion to you. Keep our priorities aligned, our schedules balanced, and our motives examined daily, so our progress never outruns our obedience or diminishes our reverence. Let this order sustain us through every season ahead. We praise you for being our defender, guide, and provider. Thank you for wisdom that protects, favor that surrounds, and peace that guards our hearts. We trust you with every outcome, every transition, and every unfolding moment ahead. Receive our gratitude, our surrender, and our confidence in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If this message has resonated with your heart or given you clarity and encouragement, I warmly invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need this word right now. Thank you for being part of this community and for walking this journey of faith together. May God continue to guide your steps, protect your heart, and increase discernment, peace, and favor in every area of your life.